Hi, welcome to Wednesday. Today's the day we're going to change things up a little bit. I'm getting bored with answering the same questions over and over again, so today is going to be one of the days this month that I'm going to talk about houses or businesses that I've cleared. And you can still write letters and still ask questions, and we will still have one of these Wednesdays where we answer questions. But I'm going to try to do some houses, talk about some houses that I've cleared. The other thing, too, is if you have had your house cleared by me and you would like that story told, then drop me a note and let me know that it's okay to talk about that. I will be changing places, names. I think it's important for everybody to keep their privacy, whether you're alive or dead. And so we won't be talking about any of that. So the first one I'm going to, before I forget, the next Zoom is on the 12th of this month, February. And it's at 7:30 at night. And that is up now, and you can make reservation for that if that's something you'd like to try to do. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do today is everybody always wants to know about kids and little kids and babies and all of that. And I've said many times I have never found a child younger than 3. Grandmas, grandpas, guardian angels, somebody comes and gets infants and toddlers. They are never stuck. Now, and people will argue with me, well, I've heard crying, a baby crying, or a little kid going, "Mommy, Mommy." Well, that's an adult ghost doing that. Or there's a cat in heat out the window. So, no, it's not a baby. There are no babies stuck anywhere. Nowhere. So this particular lady, called me up. This is the first 3-year-old that I ever ran across. This lady called me up one day and she said, "I hope you can help me." She says, "My name's Connie," and she said, "Something very strange is going on in my house." She said, "I did hear you on the radio, and so I'm hoping maybe you could help me." When I first started doing this, I was on with a lot of different radio stations. And I only went by Mary Ann, never where I lived or anything like that. And so this gal had heard me. I said, "So what's going on?" And also, at this point, this is so early, I couldn't see inside of a house. I could only go by what they told me. So she said, "My daughter and I live in the house." She says, "My daughter is 23. She says she has a lot of mental issues. She says she's bipolar. She's schizophrenic. She said she is pretty good when she's on her meds." She said, but we live together. She said, "My husband died many years ago." And she said, "I have other children." She says, "And 3 or 4 times a week, I watch my other daughter's twin girls. They were like 5 or 6 years old. And days that they didn't have school, or I don't know what the story was." She said, "So what I do," she says, "I have a whole toy box here of toys for them when they're here." She said, "Mom drops them off maybe after school in the morning, after kindergarten. They're here till 5 o'clock. Sometimes if she's working late, I'll feed them. Otherwise, they go home. Mom comes and picks them up right after on her way home from work." She says, "Here's my problem." She said, "When I get up in the morning," she says, "the toys are everywhere through the whole house." She says, "And my daughter that lives here certainly isn't touching them." She says, "But it's like somebody is playing with them." She says, "They have a couple baby dolls in there." She says, "I'll catch a baby doll on the couch, and they have it covered over with the dish towel. Went in the kitchen and got the dish towel and used it as a blanket." She said, "I do not know what's going on. Can you please come out and tell me?" And I said, "Yes." So went out and went in the house, and there happened to be a lady ghost in the house too. But that she wasn't the problem. The problem was there was this little girl, cute little girl, and she was sort of looking around a corner. She didn't come out, but she was just watching to see. And I could tell she wasn't 6 years old, or as old as her granddaughters were. And so I looked at her and I winked at her. And she smiled at me, and I told her to come here. And she sort of came, but she sort of backed off a little bit. What convinced her to come to me was, at the time, I and Ted were foster parents, and I had a baby with me, an infant in a pumpkin seat. I would do with our foster children the same thing I did with my own girls when they were little. I just took them with me. I mean, they sat in their little pumpkin seat, whatever. And so I said to this little 3-year-old, or this little girl, I didn't know she was 3 yet, I said, "You want to come see the baby?" And she came over and looked at her and rubbed the top of her head. And I says, "What's your name?" And she told me, and I'll just call her Susie. She said her name was Susie. Excuse me. And I said, "How old are you?" And she held up 3 fingers. I said, "You're 3?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Why are you here?" She said, "Because when Mommy and Daddy sent me here from when all the fighting was," she said, "this is where they sent me to." She says these people were friends of my Mommy and Daddy. She says I had to call them aunt and uncle, and then when they're not going to be fighting anymore, where our house is, then Mommy and Daddy are going to come and get me. And I said, "Okay." And I said, "Do you know when your birthday is?" And she actually knew when her birthday was, but she didn't know the year. From the way she was dressed, I would have put her in the early 50s. And I'm thinking, fighting? I says, "How did you get here?" She said, "On a boat." And she says, "We were on a boat for a long time." I said, "Who brought you here?" And she said the name of some man that brought her, but she couldn't stay with him. He brought her to these people. And I said, "To the people that live here now?" She said, "No, no, no, no." She says, "Not those people," she said, "and not the people that were here before this lady was here." And so I was she's been around I think she'd been dead for a while. And the fighting, I'm going to guess it was somewhere during World War II. And I says, "Tell me about the fighting." She says, "There's a bad man there that's taking everybody and putting them in jail." So I got to figure maybe Hitler. I mean, I don't know. You're talking to a 3-year-old. So we're talking, and I said, "Do you play with the girls when they come?" She said, "Yeah, the one can see me, but the other one can't. But then the other one tells the one that can see me," and their names were, I don't remember what their names were. They were like Peggy and Patty, something like that. She says, "Peggy can see me, but Patty can't. When Peggy tells Patty, Patty says, 'Oh, no.'" And she said, "So I just play when they're not here." She says, "I bring the toys out and I play with the toys." And I says, "And did you go get the dish towel and cover the baby up on the couch?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "What happened to you?" I says, "How come, what happened? Did your Mommy and Daddy not come and get you?" She says, No, they didn't come and get me." She said, "I don't know what happened." She says, "And Auntie kept saying, 'I don't know where they are. If they don't come here pretty soon, we're going to have to do something.'" She says, "Because Auntie had 4 of her, I had four other people, 4 other kids lived in the house. And she says, everything was just always a mess." She said, she says, "We would go outside and I says, 'How long were you here for?' She says, she says, 2 Christmases. But she says we would go out in the yard and we had the garden, and she said the food was good. And I said, 'So what happened to you?' She said, I don't know. She said, Auntie got really, really mad at me. She said, and I don't know why. And I came in the kitchen, she said, and she was making me some applesauce to eat. And I said, okay. And she says, and we made the applesauce. She says, there was a tree in the backyard and we made the applesauce. I said, oh, I bet it was good. She goes, it was good. And I said, so what happened? She said, I came in the kitchen, she says, and Auntie had one of the jars that we put green beans in from the garden. I says, well, okay. And I said, she said, and the jar was sort of that green colored. Well, you remember old canning jars? Some of them came in green. They were clear and green ones. I actually had some of the green ones. And she said, well, she said, I came in and she said, and she had a towel wrapped around the jar and she had a hammer and she was hammering the jar and hammering the jar and hammering the jar, pounding on it and pounding on it. She said, and then she said, some of that, the green from the jar, she said, she put in my applesauce. I said, she put it in your applesauce? She said, yes. And she, the auntie said, she said it tasted okay. She said, and I says, how long did she do this for? She said, I was allowed to have, she says, she said, I was being good. I could have applesauce every day. But she says, but then my stomach started to hurt, she says, and I didn't feel good. She said, and I couldn't eat anymore. She says, and I was coughing, and she says, and I don't know what happened. She says, I'm like this now. I think Auntie killed her. I think she put ground glass inside of her food. Now, this house was built in the early 20s. So this could have been people living here during World War II. That was an absolute, it could be. And so I said, okay. And I said, do you want to see your mommy and daddy? And she said, yes. I said, all right. I says, I'm going to make the white light and you can walk into the white light. And she said, is that all? I won't see Auntie, will I? Because she scares me. I says, no, you won't see Auntie. I says, you'll just see your mommy and daddy. So she went to the light. And I was really sad, but I was really happy. I mean, how do you murder a 3-year-old? She was such a cute little girl. And the lady ghost that was there, I said, do you know anything about this? She said, no. She says, I only started coming in here, she said, when her daughter had been in a hospital to get pills right and everything. She says, I was a patient there and died. She said, so I came home with her, and that's why I've been in the house. She says, I've seen the little girl. She wouldn't talk to me. She says, I see her try to talk to the grandchildren. She said, but no. And I says, well, will you go into the light now too? She said, yeah. She gave me her name and all the information, and I released her. So I told, I told them what was going on and everything, that they were gone. And it turned out that her daughter actually knew that lady from the hospital. She said, I remember her. She says, the first time, she'd been in a couple of times. She says, the first time I was in, she said, it was, she was a patient there and she had a seizure and died. And I said, she said, she was very nice. And I says, well, she followed you home. So that pretty much was the first one I've ever done. But like I said, that little girl talked so well. It was absolutely amazing how well she talked. So I think this was enough for the first one. I don't know how long it's been, how long I've been talking. I can get sort of carried away. My timer here. So we're going to stop here. We will do stories again next week, tour houses that I've cleaned. But for today, this will be the first one. If this is something that you don't want to hear about, let me know and I'll stop doing it. We'll go back to letters only. But I think that some of the stories or some of the houses that I've done, I think are pretty interesting. So thanks very much and have a great week.